The first thing I'd like to address is why you've been requested to attend this program. It's because you represent the best and the brightest in the company. This has to be true or you wouldn't be managers here. We're poised to grow as a company, and the need for professional management is becoming ever more important. Now, when I say professional management, I mean managers who routinely monitor and make decisions on metrics, who stand on values and principles, who motivate employees to achievement, and who recognize the importance of leading a team toward a goal. Why me is that I have experience with this sort of thing. I've worked with other management teams, some of whom weren't as qualified as many of you. Within a year, those teams transformed their companies. I'm also a college instructor. I have experience in developing and facilitating training that sticks. In this program, you won't have exams, but you will be expected to complete assignments and to show up to support the team. Whenever appropriate, you will practice on the job what you learn in class. We'll discuss these assignments as part of the program. And finally, why now? This is going to be a results-driven program. Unlike a college class, you'll actually be performing hands-on analysis, evaluations, and making real-life business decisions to be approved by Peter, Paul, or Dave. There's no better time than right now to start gaining the necessary knowledge, skills, and abilities that will take the company on a profitable, healthy, and successful path. What you see on this screen is the Strategic Thinking, Acting, and Learning Model. This was developed by Professor Jim Rand, a personal friend of mine at the Seattle Research Partners. The heart of the Strategic Thinking and Acting and Learning Model is the utilization of challenges and opportunities to assist managers in discovering and establishing effective methods and strategies of thinking. The objective for the model is to develop the ability for managers to work in different kinds of situations intelligently. Typically, what Professor Rand says is that when confronted with situations that present a range of issues with debatable alternative courses of action, organizations turn exclusively to techniques of quantitative analysis in an attempt to create strategic plans. Although quantitative analysis may be used effectively in the planning process, situations which involve judgment, intuition, and quality assessment call for a different approach to planning. The traditional business model emphasizes top-down planning and decision-making, resulting in a cascade of information down through the organization which may or may not have meaning for the everyday operations. Often, little, if any, time is spent seeking input and information from other levels of the organization when setting the strategic direction. The model you see in the slide is designed as a tool to elicit information, understanding, and support for the strategic direction and vision of the company. The model is uniquely designed to take advantage of the synergy that's created by using cross-functional teams to explore, discover, and design viable strategic business initiatives, and it serves as the framework from which we will deploy those initiatives. Once critical and strategic thinking is employed, strategic initiatives are developed which lead to detailed deployment plans for achieving successful results. The strategic thinking, acting, and learning model might prompt initial frustration for people who are accustomed to working with scientific and technical solutions like Peter and our engineers. Because critical thinking requires the consideration of intangible human factors, the choice between alternatives in many situations depends on a person's area of judgment, including analysis of resources, capabilities, strengths, opportunities, assumptions, and potentialities, as well as more human factors like a person's tolerance for risk. Consequently, the model is designed to present a conceptual guideline which identifies a specific pattern and includes methods of situation identification, analysis, and the development of strategic initiatives and frameworks for those initiatives to deploy them. By implication, this involves multiple levels of thinking, so we will be following through this model as we go through this training. I hope you enjoy this, and we will continue in the next slide. In our last slide, we looked at the model for strategic thinking, acting, and learning. This is still part of that model. This is the critical thinking perspective, because positioning ourselves to think critically isn't just an exercise for classroom settings. The need for critical thinking exists in all organizations in the complex and global world around us. Critical thinking is the foundation of a number of well-known management concepts. Some of those include, for example, strategic planning. Strategic planning involves exploring and imagining different and future business alternatives and determining appropriate business responses. It's also important in effective decision making, where it requires the ability to examine situations, ask questions, and to recognize and deal with unquantifiable information. Critical thinking is also important in the area of creative problem solving, because creative problem solving has at its very core the need to question the appropriateness of accepted wisdom and to free oneself from the habitual ways of thinking and perceiving that govern most organizational decisions. Critical thinking is also important in situational leadership, because situational leadership requires the ability to change our leadership style as different situations demand and to abandon fixed ways of doing things in any given situation. Also, critical thinking is important in organizational team building, because it requires members to gain a full and clear understanding of the assumptions informing each other's actions. Generally speaking, organizational decision makers use a critical thinking process to develop responses to situations that present unique challenges or opportunities. Such processes often include several steps, such as defining the issue in terms of symptoms and causes, choosing a potential solution, establishing an action plan, and following up to ensure that the plan meets its goal. Critical thinking is a reasonable decision-making process, but by itself it's incomplete. As a standalone process, critical thinking doesn't produce optimal results. When used in isolation, critical thinking can provide rational, quick-fix recommendations. However, when used as a component of a larger recommendation design process, critical thinking becomes an invaluable tool. Critical thinking, when utilized with the larger system of decision-making, becomes a key implementation component. So the question becomes, do all situations require a critical thinking process? The answer is no. Many managerial situations are fairly routine. They're easily anticipated and can be successfully addressed using past experience and readily available resources. For example, a production supervisor might note that quality coming from an automated section has dropped below standard. The supervisor calls in a maintenance troubleshooter to perform a diagnostic. The faulty machine is adjusted and quality ratings improve. No real critical thought there. On the other hand, though, situations do arise for which past experience lends no clear, actionable steps. For example, the CEO of a manufacturing firm notices that there appears to be a disconnect between management and staff. He senses the partnership's long-range vision and the firm's mission are not being communicated to employees. This is of special concern to the CEO because the company is about to seek investors in the business. For this type of challenge, past experience and readily available information might not lead to resolving the true problem, and may actually result in greater problems for the organization. A problem of this nature requires a deeper level of thinking to critically analyze if there's a real problem or if this is simply a perception by separating the symptoms from the causes. Critical thinking involves the need to recognize the assumptions underlying our beliefs and behaviors. It requires the ability to recognize the bias that we bring to any given situation based on our past experiences and our beliefs. Critical thinking will help you eliminate personal biases, identify the root causes of a problem, generate creative ideas, establish action plans, and develop follow-up strategy to ensure an action plan meets its goal and actually resolves the problem. On to the next slide. Now let's take a look at the explore stage of the model. Assumptions can bring devastating results to an organization, as we all of course know. When we're involved in the strategic thinking process, it's essential that we explore the realities of the situation with the goal of truly wanting to learn the facts and circumstances. Using exploratory questions, we can come to understand other people's perceptions and understanding of critical organizational tenets such as the mission, vision, and values, some key strategies and processes, competition, capabilities, issues, and economic realities. In your handouts is a list of exploratory questions that address both the internal aspects of the organization and the external environment in which we operate. It isn't necessary to ask all of these questions, but by selecting those that seem appropriate for the current situation, you'll begin to gather information necessary to understand and identify patterns within the company. At this stage, we'll be looking for patterns of behavior across and throughout the company that will be further examined in the discovery process. You will notice that the explore, discovery, and design portion of the model is iterative, not linear. You'll find that as you ask more questions and gather information to answer those questions, that additional questions may be generated, which of course is the explore stage. And that will require even more information to be gathered, which is the discovery stage. By asking questions, you then move to the discover stage of the model. So let's go ahead and take a look at discovery on the next slide. Now let's take a look at the explore stage of the model. Assumptions can bring devastating results to an organization, as we all of course know. When we're involved in the strategic thinking process, it's essential that we explore the realities of the situation with the goal of truly wanting to learn the facts and circumstances. Using exploratory questions, we can come to understand other people's perceptions and understanding of critical organizational tenets such as the mission, vision, and values, some key strategies and processes, competition, capabilities, issues, and economic realities. In your handouts is a list of exploratory questions that address both the internal aspects of the organization and the external environment in which we operate. It isn't necessary to ask all of these questions, but by selecting those that seem appropriate for the current situation, you'll begin to gather information necessary to understand and identify patterns within the company. At this stage, we'll be looking for patterns of behavior across and throughout the company that will be further examined in the discovery process. You will notice that the explore, discovery, and design portion of the model is iterative, not linear. You'll find that as you ask more questions and gather information to answer those questions, that additional questions may be generated, which of course is the explore stage. And that will require even more information to be gathered, which is the discovery stage. By asking questions, you then move to the discover stage of the model. So let's go ahead and take a look at discovery on the next slide.